Okay, so we just watched a video on valence electrons, and you're going to do an activity that's going to ask you about reactivity and how elements on the periodic table can be similar to other elements. And so to do that, we do need to look at the periodic table. And so here on the screen right here, I have a periodic table, and we're going to talk about valence electrons and reactivity in specific groups. So group 1 has one valence electron. Everything in this group going down is going to have one valence electron. It is going to have very high reactivity. So everything in group 1 is going to be a highly reactive metal, except for hydrogen. They're going to be highly reactive metals, and they're all going to be similar in properties to each other. Okay, group 2 is going to have two valence electrons, and everything in group 2 is going to be very similar to each other as well. But reactivity as we move across the periodic table is going to start getting lower and lower as we move across. We do skip our transition metals, so I'm going to go ahead and X those out. We do not talk about transition metals in terms of valence electrons and reactivity. Group 13 is going to have three valence electrons, and again, it's going to have less reactivity than group 2. Group 14 is going to have four valence electrons, and it's going to have the lowest reactivity of the elements on the periodic table that will react. And then reactivity is going to start getting high again. So as we move across, now it's going to start getting high. Group 15 has five valence electrons. 16 has six valence electrons. Group 17 has seven valence electrons, and it's going to be considered a very highly reactive non-metal group. So group 1 is the highly reactive metals, and group 17 are going to be highly reactive nonmetals. There are a couple metalloids in there towards the bottom, but it's still considered highly reactive nonmetals in terms of the groups. And then group 18 is going to have 8 valence electrons except for helium, and they are not going to have any reactivity. So they're not going to react with other elements on the periodic table. The reason that they're not going to react with other elements is because they have a full valence shell of 8 valence electrons. Helium is a little different because when I draw helium, it has 2 protons and it has 2 neutrons and it has 2 electrons. So when we learned how to draw elements, we know that only 2 electrons can go on that first ring. And so helium does have a full valence shell, which is why it is over there in group 18. So it only has 2 valence electrons, but it is going to have a full valence shell. And so it is not going to react with any other elements on the periodic table, just like neon, argon, krypton, xenon, and radon. Okay. So again, looking at valence electrons, it can determine how an element is going to react. Group 1 has very high reactivity, 14 has very low reactivity, 17 has very high reactivity, 18 has none, and we can also look at similar chemical properties. So anything that's in the same group going down, so carbon right here would be similar to all of these elements in the same group going down with it. So hopefully this will help you answer some of those questions that are on your activity. If you have any questions, let me know.